name is Amro Hassaan, and I work as a tools analyst for the project management office in Linaro. Obviously, lots of people couldn't make it. They got heavy after lunch, so we'll start. So basically today we're talking about the Scrum and Kanban 101, just the basics about the two methodologies and the difference between them. In order to discuss this in a way that's successful, we need to give a hint about the history of both of them and the development cycle of software in general. And for that, we will start by talking about the waterfall. So this should read, what is waterfall? Obviously, I had two slides and I used the wrong one. So what is waterfall? Not agile. So waterfall, Winston Rice, he's a computer scientist, and in 1970 he wrote a paper about the software development methodology, and it described how we go through processes of software development, and basically it goes through this shape here, which is a waterfall. And at the end of his paper, he didn't actually recommend it. He said it's really resistant to change, and it doesn't scale well. And obviously, this is why it's called a waterfall. Water never goes up. So the problem with this method is that there are many silos and gaps between each of the different phases of the development process. And once you deliver an artifact to the next level, it's really hard to process a request for change. And often the failure rate to meet the product deadline and requirements was higher. And this is why around the mid-'80s, two gentlemen from Harvard Business School wrote a document which was the seed for the whole Scrum and Agile methodology. It was called the New Product Development Game, and they described it how to do software development in a short iteration way that to allow rapid feedback and response to change. And they used a simile to the Scrum, which was used in the rugby game. And from this paper, around the early 90s, many processes started showing, like Scrum and XP and Lean and many others. So Scrum was introduced by Jeff Sutherland and Ken Swaber, and XP by Kent Beck. And basically, these processes aim at enhancing the process of delivering and producing software with maintaining high responsiveness to change and being able to focus on the customer requirement without actually breaking the process or having to lose much of the work that has been done or having to redo it again. And these ones have the same core values. And the people behind these processes came together in 2000, and they wanted to unify the process. And when they came together, they came up with something called the Agile Manifesto, which basically aims at consolidating the whole idea and the common elements in these processes together. And the Agile Manifesto that they came out with have 4 values and 12 principles. We're gonna just discuss the 4 values here. No time for the 12 principles, of course. And this is the Agile Manifesto, and basically it's like a table, and they talked about valuing the items on the left over the items on the right, which these are the legacy ways of doing things, and they don't, the Agile Manifesto basically mentions that we should not abandon the old way of doing things, but rather try to use the new way of doing things, which is Agile. And for this, they say we appreciate or want to stress more highlight over the individuals and interactions over processes and tools, and working software over comprehensive documentation, and customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. But technically speaking, from applying this in the real world, it's not one or the other. It's a mix of both. And the right thing to do is to envision it like a mixing board, where you have to just push it towards a little bit, or scale it towards what you see fit for your organization. And for example, in a distributed environment like Linaro, we can't do successful individual interactions every day because we're not collocated together. There is a distributed environment, and for this reason, we may have to depend on more processes and tools like Skype or IRC, and the same applies everywhere. Also, the working software is a key concept. We need to deliver increments rather than spending so much time doing big design upfront and documenting everything in massive documentation, and then going from what was written on the paper to write the software. It has to be done incrementally with minimal documentation. It doesn't have to be very comprehensive from the beginning. And the same applies to customer collaboration and the contract negotiation. We have to, from our iterations, we give feedback in a short iteration to the customer and let them know where the product is going, and this will help us meet and adapt to their changes and move it toward their expectation. And this will help us, of course, achieve the contract negotiation. But at some points, contract negotiation is always important and needs to be included in the equation, because nothing stands unchanged easily. So we have to mix both of them. Also, responding to change and following a plan. No plan done up front, so no plan can stand the first contact with the enemy right away. So we have to be able to respond to changes and be able to be more agile in our response. And agility, in my own definition at least, means being able to respond to change without breaking or having to redo the entire thing that was done again, or the product. And from this point onward, the Scrum came on, and it was a very, and it is actually a very successful way of doing things. It fits more smaller teams. It's basically the definition of a Scrum. It's a lightweight adaptive framework for managing complex development project, and that means it's a framework that enables you to adjust on the fly to any requirement or change that comes in. You don't have to, there's no silos anymore, because one of the main concepts of Scrum to have overlapping phases of software. You design and you document, but there's still, you keep interaction between every process. So basically, it's a flexible and holistic approach focused on the customer perspective, and it's adaptive to change. It has, the main concept is you have a prioritized backlog. It's a stack-ranked backlog with having the highest priority on the top of the stack and the lowest priority down the stack. And you go through iterations of development, and you develop and you produce in a time-boxed phases called sprints. And at the end of each sprint, you deliver an increment of what you already have achieved. And so the reason is to expose this to the product owner earlier as possible, so that it's open for change, and you can actually incorporate his feedback into the process and be able to add the change into your product without actually having to disrupt the whole thing. So there is a constant checkpoints every day, which are called stand-ups. And these aim for having a very small iterations intra the team, between the team members themselves, so that they discuss how things are going on and if there's any problem, and they can help each other produce the software and produce the, go through the sprint and meeting the goals. So what does it comprise of? It consists of, it has roles, and it has events, and it has artifacts. So basically, there are 3 main roles in Scrum. One of them is the product owner, and the second is the Scrum Master, and the development team. So these are the 3 roles. And the events, you basically have the sprint planning meeting in the beginning of each sprint. You have the daily stand-up. That's one of the events. And you have 2 ceremonies at the end of each sprint that conclude the sprint work, which are the sprint review and the sprint retrospective. And also you have an artifacts. The main artifacts of Scrum are basically 4 items, which are the increment you are producing, and the product backlog, and the sprint backlog, and the burn down chart. These are the artifacts in the process. And of course, you need a set of rules to hold all these together, to organize the process. It has many intricate details in the middle amongst them that actually help you move through the Scrum and move through the project and knowing exactly what you're doing. But you don't have to, you are always free to change the process lightly in the middle while maintaining the main things. You don't have to mess with these roles and events and artifacts, but you can change the processes or the principles or the rules as suits your team. The first role is the product owner, who is the owner of the product. So he champions the whole thing, the product, and he facilitates the product decisions, and he always has a final say on the product directions. So he's responsible, or she's responsible, typically for some collaborations with the Scrum team as well as the stakeholders outside the product. And they always take the vision and put it that's coming from the execs or from the customer, and they build the backlog. They develop it into a backlog of requirements. And they're also responsible for understanding the market need and the features and the visions that needs to go to interpret the requirement, the business requirement. The product owner may or may not author the stories that actually sums or tells what are we going to do to develop this product. But they always do it in collaboration. If they're going to do it, they do it in collaboration with the development team to ensure inclusion of technical background. The second role is the Scrum Master, and he's basically a servant leader to facilitate the team. He's there to remove any impediments that may come during the development process, because this process has to run as smooth as possible, and we need to get the team to focus on what they're doing rather than let them handle everything on their own. And hence comes the Scrum Master, who actually facilitates this process. But the team itself, and that's the third role, has to be a self-organizing team, and that means that everybody can pitch in at any time, and they can work. It doesn't have to be special, like every member of the team doesn't have to be specialized and working in silo. And this is, again, is the main principle of Agile. And for this reason, the team must be self-organizing, and that means the daily stand-ups, they don't have to have the Scrum Master at some point. Sometimes Scrum Master attending the stand-up, it's not a must, but it's preferred so that he take notes and actually knows what's going on in the process and help remove the impediments. Also, non-sequential execution is a key, and basically that means I don't have to wait for a piece of code to be written by one of my colleagues during the sprint, and I'm going to pick it up after he's done and put mine on top of it. We can both work in parallel, and then we integrate our pieces together. So this actually helps more of short feedback loops and being able to respond to change. So this is a graph showing exactly how the Scrum process runs. So basically, the first thing that happens usually is the business need emerges, and input comes from the executives and stakeholders about what they need in the product. And then the product owner, who is the person responsible for the product, interacts directly with the customers, and he's responsible for the vision of the product. He's also responsible for the roadmap and sort of portfolio planning. Also, he aggravates everything that he took from the execs into a vision. And in a sort of a visionary meeting, he starts meeting with the team and telling them that this is what we really need, and this is the items on our backlog that we will want to work on. This vision gets translated on to items, and then it has to be prioritized. So the product backlog is usually prioritized in a stack fashion. Also, collaboration between the product owner and the Scrum Master and the team also has to be done almost every step of the way, because they want to ensure that there is some sort of technical integrity. So also there is a grooming session that the product owner is responsible for, and this grooming session, it's a routine initiative that has to be kept and kept in practice all the time to weed out any elements of the product log that are not actually has decreased in priority. So they put them down or pump them up according to the changing priorities. The next step is starting the sprint. So what happens technically is the team comes together and they start grabbing the top 5, 6, 7, whatever they see fit, top items from the backlog, and they put these items in their sprint backlog. So a sprint, first of all, is a time-boxed iteration. It can be 1 to 4 weeks. Recommended always is 2, but it's up to the team and the Scrum Master. And what happens in the sprint planning meeting is that the team takes these items into sprint log, and that means they are going to commit to delivering these items at the end of the sprint. They size the items, and there is a whole discussion about sizing, how to do the sizing, and there are certain techniques that can be used to do that. And then after they have the sprint backlog ready, they start the sprint. The sprint would basically be 2 weeks most of the time, and at the end of the sprint, they should be able to deliver an increment or a piece of software that's shippable. And by shippable doesn't mean necessarily that it has to be functional 100%, but release ready. It has the minimum requirements that makes it easy for that piece to be integrated with whatever was delivered before. So the events that happen during the sprint is, there is the sprint planning meeting, we talked about that, and then the daily stand-up. The daily stand-up, it happens every 24 hours. That can be very hard in a distributed environment like what we have in Linaro, and for this reason, we can scale Agile to what we see fit into our scenario or our nature of the team. And we can, for example, we can have 2 stand-ups weekly instead of 1 daily, and it can be longer, a little bit, not extremely longer, but usually it's 15 minutes, the daily stand-up, but if we're gonna have it two stand-ups weekly, so it can be 40 minutes or 1 hour max. And still, we will be able to deliver and meet our goals. So Scrum can be applied in distributed environments, but not according to the pure definition of Scrum that Scrum Alliance has defined. And once the sprint is finished, typically what happens is 2 ceremonies happen in the closing of the sprint. One of them is the sprint review, and in the sprint review, the goal behind it is to do sort of a demo to the product owner about what has been delivered and what has been produced so far. And the reason for it is not to declare that the product is ready, but the main goal behind it is to open it for discussion with the product owner, that this is what we have accomplished, what's your feedback about it, does it fit with your expectations or not, and this will enable the feedback loop to happen in a good or a rapid fashion. And then the team will be able to take these changes back and redo the work as required or seen fit. And then the next ceremony is the sprint retrospective, which is very, very important in my opinion. This is the heart of the whole process. The sprint retrospective is when the team comes together and they go and look back at what they have accomplished during the sprint, and they only have to answer 2 questions. What have we done right and what we have done wrong? This is where the team learns. They have a list of what they did that they thought it was right and turned out not right, and actually hindered or introduced bottlenecks in the process, and they eliminate this in the next sprint. And what they did and proved to be working very well, and they will continue to do that. Also, I forgot to mention that in the daily stand-up, the developers only, it's not a status report, it's basically short, like 3 questions basically. The developer is supposed to report on what he did, how did he do against the things that he committed to do in the last 24 hours, and what are the things he's going to commit to in the next 24 hours, and if there are any impediments and if he needs help. This is basically the 3 questions that goes in the stand-up, and this is why it should be kept short. So this is basically, in a nutshell, is the Scrum method. Again, it fits smaller teams, and it can be scaled to meet the demands of bigger teams, but it has to use a scaled form of Agile called SAFe, or a Scaled Agile Framework, which basically is Scrum of Scrums. And then we have, on the other hand, the Kanban. The Kanban is basically a work management approach focused on enhancing production flow. It's basically all about flow. And the key concept in Kanban is to limit the work in progress. So basically, you take some work and you have specialized lanes of development and testing or QA and review or whatever, and you stick to the number of work items, you are controlled by these numbers. So if we move forward, well, this will come later. So first it was pioneered by Toyota, by a guy called Taiichi Ohno, and it just underpins the just-in-time delivery, which basically you need to restock an item when there is a requirement for having it. You receive a request from a customer, you need to manufacture a piece. This is just in time. You fill that restock. And the same concept was implemented in software, but it's basically scaled to meet the software flavor. So it focuses on speed, predictability, and continuous improvement, and it reduces the waste. And the waste basically is the time an item sits idle in the process. So it comes from Japanese words, of course, means visual card. So it's basically a visual card that you can see, and it's all about visualizing the process. That is one of the keys that help get work done in a high quality fashion. So with uppercase, it's the process. With a lowercase, it's card, obviously. So this is the best picture that depicts the Kanban. It's like a tube that you input the feature request from one side, and you get a very improved, high-quality software from the other side. And whatever happens in that tube is that you have a really tight control over what's happening over there by limiting the work in progress and also measuring and managing the workflow constantly. So the limiting of the work progress enables the team and the manager of the process to enhance the process and remove bottlenecks. By having a specific number of items worked on, you reduce the distraction that happens from context switching that happens in Scrum. Because typically what happens in Scrum is that every developer is not working on one task only. He has multiple tasks and multiple goals. And for this reason, Scrum is a bit of more difficult process, a little bit, and it needs close monitoring and needs a self-organized team that really is able to switch roles, and everybody can pitch in at any time to help the other. But here, you tend to work in a specialized fashion more. And that means that there is a lane for testing or QA and debugging, and another one for doing the development, and another one for review, and so on and so forth. But the team also can collaborate to work on getting things done. Limiting the workers in progress is the key concept to shorten the cycle time and the lead time. So basically, the cycle time is the amount of time spent on the item, spent working on the item. So you have items in the Kanban process, and you're working on one item currently, but then once you've done development, you push it to the QA, but the QA currently are working on another item, so that item stands or sits idle in the system. We need to reduce the idle time. The idle time and the work time equals the lead time. The lead time is the entire time measured since the request comes in the process and comes out of the process. So this is the lead time, the entire time. But the cycle time is the work time spent just working on that item. And there is something called value stream mapping to gauge the efficiency of the process, which is basically, if you can imagine, if you can imagine the timeline of the process, and you have a feature that came in, and it took 1 day of development, then we spent 4 days without touching that item, and then it took another day in testing, and then we didn't touch it for 4 or 5 days, and then there was bugs that needs to be fixed, and then we worked on it again. So on top of the timeline, if you can put your cycle time, the time that you worked on this item, and at the bottom, the rest of the idle time, and then you can use Little's law to do the division and see what's the efficiency of your process, and you can account for the rest of the wasted time by pushing more items. You scale your process by pushing more items in the system and raising the work in progress limit to be able to use the team. But you don't want to exhaust the team during the process, because you want them to focus on high quality piece of software, and this is typically one of the key concepts in Kanban, is to have to be able to produce high quality increment. So in order to implement Kanban, these are the things that you need to do. First, you need to design the workflow. So it has a backlog, but it's not shown in this diagram. So the backlog, you prioritize things like you have it prioritized in the Scrum. And then you have your lanes. So the lanes would be the development lane or in progress. So one would be open. That means that an item is ready and have all the requirements to be pulled in the system, and we start working on it. The second would be in progress. And the third would be, for example, the QA, which is the testing and the bug fixing, for example. And you can have under these lanes sub-columns as well to indicate the finer grain of what's happening in the process. And the next step is to specify your limit for work in progress. And then you define policies. And then you start pooling the work across the Kanban board. Now, the constraint is you can never, ever exceed the number on the lane itself. On the greater lane, for example, if you have a QA lane that is specified to 3 items, you cannot have more than 3 items in this lane. Also, there is flexibility in moving the items back and forth. This is not recommended, though. The other ways that are recommended is to have sub-lanes in the lane to indicate exactly if something is happening. For example, in the QA, you can be testing, and you can indicate that the item that you are testing did not pass the test, and therefore there are bugs. And for this reason, you'll have another sub-lane for fixing bugs. And then after you're done, you measure your performance and adapt. So if you notice here in the second lane, it has 4 items, and the fifths come in. That means it's going to change color, for example, in JIRA, and says you're having too much cards in this lane currently, more than the limit for the work in progress. This is typically how it looks like. So right now you have 5 items or 4 items in the ready queue, and these are ready to be pulled on, but you never pull anything unless you're done. So obviously this one has 10, the development has 10, it has sub-columns, 1 in progress and 1 is done. And the definition of done is one of the things that we need to pay attention to during this process, because once this done under the develop column means the developer has finished the task, but it's not necessarily tested. But this last column here is the done column. This is how it looks like in JIRA. This is a real Kanban board, and the color here signifies that the red, of course, means that this one is overloaded. It has more than the number that it should, more the work in progress limit number. And the other one says it's ready. It indicates it's ready to have more items to be worked on. So the limiting work in progress is the key concept, again, in Kanban. What it does is it reduces multitasking, and it increases focus, and it improves the performance by reducing the cycle time. It reduces the average lead time, and it helps identify the bottlenecks. So this is basically very experimental numbers that you take before you start running the process, and you adjust and adapt. So you see if you can identify bottlenecks because you have committed to bigger number than you expected that you will be able to finish, and then you decrease that work in progress number. So finally, this is a comparison between the two approaches, and so for the cadence or the focus between the Scrum and Kanban, Scrum is a time-boxed iterations which have the sprint. The Kanban basically is a mere workflow. For the metrics, the Scrum uses velocity, which is one of the metrics that the team comes to calculate at the team retrospective meeting at the end of the sprint. On the other hand, on the Kanban, you have the cycle time. This is your only gauge and your main gauge there. The characteristics in the Scrum, you have 3 roles, 3 events, and 4 artifacts. The 3 roles are product owner, the Scrum Master, and the development team. The 3 events are the stand-up, daily stand-up, and the sprint planning meeting, and the closing ceremonies, which are the review and retrospective. And also you have 4 artifacts, which is the increment you deliver, the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the burn down chart. In Kanban, it's all about visualizing the workflow. And this is why you have to see everything in columns to be able to spot bottlenecks instantly. Also, there is the limiting of the work in progress. And with regards to roles, there are no defined roles in Kanban. It prefers specialization between the lanes. Development lane doesn't intersect with the testing lane or whatever your process defines. But in the key artifact also, there is a burn down diagram and a cumulative flow diagram. So the burn down diagram is a diagram that shows your progress against the backlog. And the best way, what it should show is it should go down the whole time. The number of tasks you're working on should be always going down. For the cumulative flow diagram, it shows the amount of work at a certain state in time. And so basically the Scrum is suited for smaller teams, and the Kanban is suited for larger teams. The increments, both of them deliver smaller increments, and they increase the feedback for ROI, and they mitigate the risks, and they maximize the learning process. And the retrospective happens in the Scrum at the end of the sprint, while happens daily in Kanban because the team is coming to work together and see what's happening actually. If there's a bottleneck, it's identified instantly. And this leads to the next point, which is the management inclusion. In Scrum, basically the Scrum is a black box. You give your word to the product owner and to ask him kindly to step out, and you go and do your work, and you come out at the end of the sprint, and you show them what you have produced. But on Kanban, if there is a problem or a bottleneck, the team lead or the product manager can have a visual into the process instantly to see what's happening. And this leads to mitigating any problem or resolving any bottleneck that happens. And this is pretty much the difference between the two processes and the whole concept behind Scrum and Kanban. These are just the basics, of course. There are many other small details in the process, in each of the processes, but what's really recommended is you just take a first step towards each of them, any of them, and you start, the key concept is you start observing what you have done and learn from any mistakes you have done. So inspect and adapt in both cases. So that's pretty much it. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.